okay. And I think we're actually going to jump in to make sure that we've got enough time to talk through everything that we want to go through. Just to kind of give context as to where this webinar got started, and I wouldn't even call it so much a webinar as much as just presenting the report that we emailed to many of you, and just having another way of showing people. Some people are visual learners and some people like to engage in dialogue, and some people prefer to hear the data talked through. And so we sent all of you this week a pandemic shipping report that we've been working on for months, actually, as we accumulated different types of data, and I'll talk to you about it. And we decided that it would be a good idea to just talk to you about it straight up, because many of you are the people whose insights are actually encompassed within this report. My name is Rocky Brody. I'm going to go through and introduce who's on the call today, what our agenda is, and what we're about to do. Just a couple of technical notes before we get started. Number one is that, as always, we will be recording this webinar and we'll be sending it to all of you within a couple of days. The second thing is, for any of you who are not familiar with Zoom webinars or who don't attend them regularly, there's both a chat and a Q&A. You can chat with just the panelists or with everyone, and you can also post in the Q&A is more geared towards questions that you think you would like us to address in the final portion of the webinar in the Q&A at the end, or questions that we can address directly online with you during the presentation. I'm actually located right now at home in quarantine because I recently traveled and I'm located near the Tel Aviv area. If anyone wants to jump in and tell us where you are, I know that we've got lots of people across the globe today, and we started this particular webinar at a time that we could kind of still reach out potentially to people in Europe, closing up their days, and then all the way in America, starting out early morning. So feel free to post in the chat where you're located, and hope that you all enjoy our talk today. Without further ado, I'm going to get started now, and hopefully everyone who wanted to join had a chance to join during my intro. Good to see people. We've got people from Oregon, from Canada, from New Hampshire. Really keep it coming and tell us where you are. It's always good to kind of put a location to a face and make these a lot more interesting and engaging, and understand who's in the background. Wow, Hong Kong, you're up late. Thank you. Okay, let's get started. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We published a recent Freightos.com pandemic shipping report. And why did we put this report together? How did we get the data? Well, actually, what we saw was happening was two things simultaneously. One is that, as many of you know, and we don't need to tell you, there's been complete chaos in the freight industry, and we're going to go through some of the trends there. And we saw that as pricing was increasing and there were delays and transit time issues, we were experiencing with our own customers what the different pain points that they were going through. And we were also looking at all of our data sources and the same sources that you're seeing about what's happening in the industry overall. And we decided, it's really important for us to actually set out and talk through the data and understand what is happening and how we can help you as a team, both as Freightos.com, the online booking platform, but also give you information about what's happening in the industry. And so today we have Karine Berzon, who actually put together, and she's going to be presenting the findings, hey Karine, of this amazing report that she put together using lots of different data sources that we'll talk through. Myself, I'm the Senior Director of Demand, which basically means anyone who comes and is an importer or exporter using Freightos.com to get quotes from the logistics providers on our site and to book and manage their shipments online. And so I'm talking to buyers all the time and just find both this data aspect and how people have navigated the situation, which is so challenging, to be fascinating. And I'm happy to be talking to you all today. We also actually have on our call Aya Mutin, who's our customer success team lead, and she probably speaks to the most buyers in the entire company. She's been around freight for years, and she knows every inside story of what's going on really on the front lines. And we also have Daphne Farkas joining us from corporate marketing, who has been talking to lots of press outlets, because as somebody who, freight used to be not such a popular topic at a cocktail event, and now has become something that just at a casual event, someone will be like, what do you know about this freight crisis that's going on, ever since the Suez Canal, and also since we see so many different articles and just mainstream outlets talking to how it's going to hit the end consumer and the end customer. So everybody all of a sudden who needs goods is interested in freight, which is exciting for us as people who spend their days in freight. And I'm sure is less exciting to you who are handling all the challenges and pain points of it. And so I'm just going to talk through how we gathered the data for this survey, and then I'm going to hand it over to Corinne, who's going to walk us through what the survey means and talk through all the different insights. So really the survey encompasses a couple of different angles of pain points. One is that we started surveying customers starting in January and asking them all different questions about how supply chain congestion has hit their business and how they're adapting. And then the goal there was really threefold. It was, number one, to understand the pain points as a product that we're trying to give to the industry, and as a solution as Freightos.com, being an online booking platform and trying to understand who is using this and how do we make sure to address your needs. The second was, and how to make our product better. The second was actually not so much on the product level, but one of the things that we try to focus a lot on within our marketing team is how to provide freight education to everybody, because there's a certain educational component to understanding what's happening in the industry and how to mitigate those challenges, and then how to use our product to find the best quotes for you. But it's not going to tell you, should I ship my goods from A to B or from B to C? That you need to get some education and understanding of. And so we wanted to be able to understand what the best practices are of the different respondents. And we also wanted to give back to the industry, right? We, as we mentioned, Daphna's on the call, and we like to share our data, obviously anonymously and very carefully. But if we're looking at trends, for example, in The Economist, we were published recently regarding how freight cost could and supply chain constraints could actually affect inflation. And we're sitting there on the front lines of what's happening in the industry day to day. And so that's really important to share with the public, how this actually could affect everyone. So the first part of that was a series of surveys, and we thank all of you on the call who actually participated in those surveys and took the time to fill them out and to give us information. The second thing is that we actually have access to two different types of data within our company. For those of you who are not data geeks, feel free to get a lemonade right now or another cup of coffee. For those of you who are, or who want to really understand, I'm sure everyone on the call actually wants to understand that we're not making up this information and that the data that we're going to present to you is accurate and is reputable. And so we have two different sources for that. One is the Freightos Baltic Index, which is the world's international freight index for container pricing. And that takes specific trade lanes between carriers and freight forwarders. And we get that through our internal data of forwarders who are uploading their buy rates onto what they are buying, from the carriers. And so what's really important to understand when we present the Freightos Baltic Index data is that that's not the bookable rates that a importer or exporter would book, but rather what the freight forwarder would buy on average that container for. So sometimes people will see a bit of discrepancy between the pricing that they'll see on the FBX data and the pricing on Freightos.com, which I'll get to in a minute. And they'll be like, why is that a little bit higher? Well, obviously, if a freight forwarder is on average buying, a container for a certain amount, then that is going to end up with a markup based on their service fees. And then Freightos.com is our global freight booking platform, which connects importers and exporters, like many of the people on this call, I'm sure, with logistics providers to offer the best solution for every shipment. And so that is an online marketplace. If you haven't been there before, you can go to ship.freightos.com. And you can see that we have live bookable rates going on every day. And those are updated all the time in real time with many integrations from logistics providers directly via API into our platform. And so what's really important here to understand, and the basis of why I'm spending so much time talking about the different data that we're going to be presenting to you, is to understand that we're getting our sources from different places. We're getting our sources from both what's going on in the freight industry at large, and the FBX is reflective of that. We're getting our information from what people are booking on our platform and seeing the trends in how people are booking differently and where they're searching differently and how the volume is changing there. And then we're also getting insights from you, the importers and exporters, in terms of how you're adapting to these challenges. So now we're going to jump right into the insights. And for those of you who went to get a cup of coffee while I went through the data part, hope you're back and engaged with us right now. And you might be wondering, when we started to go through this pandemic shipping report, well, why are you presenting us with data from January to June? And why is that interesting to us today? And the reason that we find it's most timely, actually, and why we scheduled this for the last week of August, when many people, I'm sure, are wrapping up vacations and woke up early before going to the beach, is because the current freight market is actually affecting many of our customers' holiday freight planning. And when we asked you even yesterday, and we saw tons and tons of really fascinating responses there, but we just posted a couple here anonymously. Everybody from saying that they had to push up all of their orders for the holidays by as much as 12 weeks, or just has such a lack of certainty as to how to predict their supply chain, when goods are going to be delivered, how much they're going to sell. Just a total mess. And you can see that it's affecting everybody. In the article on the left-hand side from the New York Times, you can see it's affecting, tricycles, and how you can see the quote at the bottom, that it's unclear when things will clear up. It's possible that they're even going to get worse before they get better. Many of us thought that the pandemic was kind of coming to an end, and now with the Delta variant and with surges, we see that, we're really in this for a while still. And the holiday season, on the other hand, is right around the corner. We don't know what to do about inventory, and coronavirus outbreaks are continuing. And so there's just a lot of uncertainty going on in the market. And so it's important for everyone here to understand, number one, you're not in it alone. There are many people on this call who are experiencing the same things as you are. Feel free to actually post in the chat if you want to discuss with Daphna, who's in corporate marketing, if you have a really interesting story that you would want her to share with one of the press outlets that we talk to regularly, or even if you just want to chat with other people on the call. We have no issue with side chatting while we're walking through the report. And we really view this as a community that you can continue to engage with while we're walking through things. And so now we're going to jump straight in with Corinne to talk about the actual tips that we got. And for some of you, you might actually even have printed out the pandemic shipping report or have it on a tablet right next to you or on your screen, and you can follow along with that as well. So Corinne, you want to talk to us a little bit about the tips for SMBs from SMBs and where that really started and how we started to survey people.
Sure. So first of all, I want to say hi to everyone. And I'm so happy you were all able to join us. It's really amazing, I think, at this time of year in August when everything is so wild, that so many of you made the time to be here. And I'm just really grateful that you have all been able to join us. So before I even get into the data, I saw that we already had a really great question that I think is worth answering right off the bat. And that is that, why are prices so high for so long? That it's already been a year and a half since the pandemic started, and we're still seeing rates climbing. And they don't seem to be showing any hope of coming back down or even plateauing. So I think that this is interesting and important to address before we even get into the hard data. So basically, this has just been a wild domino effect from the very beginning. Initially, when the pandemic hit, carriers started pulling back shipments, thinking that there would be a recession, that there would be a slump in imports and exports. They were trying to hedge their losses. But then towards the summer, consumer demand picked up very, very rapidly. And there was an incredibly high rate of purchases for import. And even though China was opening back up again, there was just not enough container space available, and it's kind of just continued that way. In addition, in ports all around the world, there have been closures and outbreaks and all kinds of issues that have caused massive delays that have kept containers and ships floating and waiting to unload, which has obviously further reduced the capacity. And as capacity is reduced and demand stays high, that drives prices up. Plus, it takes a really long time to make containers. It takes a super long time to make ships. And as long as capacity is as full as it is, which is right now almost at 100%, I think it's just below 100%, which it's unprecedented. As long as capacity is so pressed and demand remains so high, we can expect to see prices stay high as well. So let's talk a little bit about the data now. Let's start by just saying who has been using Freightos and who's been answering our surveys. So we know that when we asked who you are, who the people answering our surveys are, 60% responded that they are e-commerce, which is pretty much in line with what we've been seeing in the trends globally as well, because we know that there's been a massive boom in the number of small businesses that have started since the pandemic. We have seen a really big increase, a 24% increase year over year in new businesses that have been started, and a lot of them are SMBs and e-commerce businesses. Okay, let's see what else there is here. Rock, you want to go to the next slide? Great. So we also asked our users and what they've been experiencing since the pandemic has started in terms of their shipping and their supply chains, and what types of effects have been happening. So the majority has been delays. Delays has been a huge issue. As I mentioned, the closures in ports, and just the capacity. Like in Long Beach right now, there are still dozens of ships waiting outside of the port to dock and unload. Things are super congested, and even more than as exorbitant as pricing is, we've been seeing a lot of importers and exporters expressing that their worst pain point right now is delays. And of course, pricing is a close second to delays, but also mostly at the beginning, there was a lot of limitations on what was allowed to be shipped. PPE was problematic. Customs became problematic. Everything that needed to go through security and health checks in ports also caused a lot of delays. The way demand has been moving, the increase in demand has made it more difficult to calculate inventory. And the shifts, for example, at the beginning of the pandemic, Amazon was shifting regulations and changing regulations pretty quickly. And that caused a lot of difficulties for FBA shippers. Importers and exporters have, in general, been facing a lot of difficulties in their supply chains. An important thing to also note is that for smaller businesses that don't have a dedicated logistics team, it is even more challenging because you need to do the research yourself and find the right forwarders and get the right customs forms filled out. It's a lot of paperwork and a lot of research. And without a dedicated logistics team, that can be challenging.
Yeah. And even for big, I just wanted to jump in there on one point that talk about pain points that we've been talking to even a lot of really large shippers who came to us originally because their contracts just weren't holding up anymore because of the price increase, or anytime they went beyond their contract. So let's say, they're committed to a certain amount of capacity that they can get at a certain rate, but then anything above that is becoming exorbitantly high. And so they're coming onto the spot market actually on Freightos.com and looking for options there. But it also really ties back to that holiday point that we made earlier, where different things over time, all of these are definitely the top reasons, but obviously this survey was taken at a very, at a snapshot in time. And it could be that today predicting quantities of product to order is maybe higher because of the holiday season. And so there's just a lot of changes even within those different things, but definitely over, across the board, we've definitely seen delays in pricing are just that.
For sure. And demand is just not dropping off. People are buying and buying. What ended up happening is that when consumers were in lockdown, they turned to online shopping. And when there were no services to be purchased, there were no restaurants or movies, theaters, or, amusement parks. So they stayed home and ordered pools that would fit on their balconies. And this is a lot of where this high demand has come from. So we always give this example of of Eitan, of one of our coworkers ordered a couch, and instead of it arriving in 6 weeks, it's arriving in who knows when, 3, 4 months. So even as consumers, we've been feeling the impact as well. And I'm sure many of you on the call have as well realized that when you order something that used to take a week or two, it's now taking a month, 2 months, even longer. So before we just move on, yeah, go ahead, Rocky.
Yeah, I was just going to say that this kind of feeds really nicely into the next slide where we talk about the differences that we saw between January and June.
For sure, because it's been ongoing. It just hasn't dropped off. So let's say, yeah, this is a great slide. This is what I really love about this data is that it shows how freight is really trickling down through the entire global market, that it's not just about importing and exporting anymore. The end consumer, the end buyer who walks into a store to get, garden furniture may be feeling the impact as well, because as importers and exporters are facing lower margins, and the cost of freight and shipping is eating into their profits, many are being forced to pass that along to the end consumer. So you could see here that from January to June, this has been exacerbated. That in December or January, it's December or January, Rocky?
January.
So from January until June, these numbers have only gone up. That the inflation in pricing that's caused by the increased cost of freight and shipping is getting more prominent as time is going by. I'm just going to plug in my computer 1 second. So I wanted to answer just a question from Pedro about shipping to Europe. So we do see a lot of shipping from Asia to US, but there have been an increase in prices as well from Asia to Europe, from Europe to the US, through European ports as well. So even though obviously the most busy lanes are the Asian to US lanes, to North America lanes, all of the rates that we're seeing, we'll get to the pricing chart in a minute, but you'll see that we also have been talking about increases across European lanes as well.
And actually, I was just on another meeting with Daphna earlier today where our data analysts are looking into a whole analysis of Asia to Europe right now. And so in the next couple of days or week or so, we should have some more results on that as well.
Great. So keep checking in.
Yeah.
All right. So without further ado, let's look at the where the money is going, which is into the high cost of freight these days. So this is actually changed a little bit since we sent out this report, because there have been some additional closures in air cargo, and that's been driving prices up. But you could see that the trend is that really at the beginning of the pandemic, air prices skyrocketed as ocean pulled back, as I said, to hedge their losses, and also because there were so many closures in Asia, and the entire industry in Asia was shut down at the beginning before we started having rolling lockdowns in North America, and in other areas of the world. Asia was locked down first, and that's really when air cargo went kind of nuts and then balanced out. But you could see that it's still double what it was a year ago. And recently we have seen some additional spikes because of some outbreaks at various ports among handlers. So that means when there's less staff to consolidate and deconsolidate, to unpack and pack, then it's causing delays, which again causes congestion, which reduces capacity, and lack of capacity and high demand causes higher prices. So this is what we've been seeing across air and ocean. And let's look specifically at ocean on the next slide. And here you can see really just that it's been really, really wild waters the last year. The ocean prices across almost every lane, across every single lane, have gone up dramatically. Some of them even 6 times higher than they were before the pandemic. And it's just not leveling out so quickly. And again, depending on the kind of disruptions that we've seen either in Shanghai, Yanshan had a closure, and they thought Ningbo was going to have a massive closure, but in the end that was resolved. So every time there's one of these types of events that are unpredictable, even natural disasters, there were forest fires and floods, and every time this kind of thing happens, these force majeure kind of events, it affects the flow of goods across shipping lanes. And that again causes delays, congestion, and higher prices.
Yeah, so I'm excited to go on to the next part because I feel like until now, it's been a bit depressing, right? We're just talking about all of the pain points and delays and congestion and pricing. And, our most frequent question, I think, on webinars is like, when is this actually going to end? And unfortunately, we actually both don't have a crystal ball, but also don't foresee, because of the different constraints that you talked about earlier, any type of leveling off of this pricing right now. But I think we can talk about, how businesses are adapting and some of the practices that we saw through our surveys and through our conversations with buyers on how people are mitigating this and being proactive and continuing to grow their businesses. And capture some of the demand that they're getting from e-commerce, right? So I'm sure many people have seen, on the one hand, it's really hard to get your goods. On the other hand, you're seeing an increase in demand of people wanting to buy your goods. And so how do you kind of take advantage of that?
100%. I mean, along with, these kinds of trends, there are challenges, but there are also huge opportunities. And we've been seeing, especially in smaller businesses that are able to be more innovative and agile, and they have less big, huge cogs and are able to move parts a little swifter, have really been able to look at the trends and kind of adjust how they're running their businesses in order to mitigate the increased costs, delays, and figure out where to send their goods in a way that will be the most efficacious on the ground. Because obviously, as this trickles down, it also impacts rail, it also impacts trucking, and last leg logistics have also been struggling. So even though we're focused really on the main leg of transit, we're seeing that a lot of SMBs are being really smart about how they distribute their goods in a way to get them to the final consumer swiftly and with as little impact on cost as possible. So one of the trends that we've really been seeing has been a pretty dramatic growth in LCL shipments, and there have been commentators across the industry talking about this. I just read an article today in JOC about it, that, LCL, basically what's happening is that forwarders are buying space from carriers and then accepting multiple shipments into that one container. And then they're responsible for the consolidation and deconsolidation, the pick and pack kind of stuff that comes on at the beginning and the end, depending what you're shipping under. So this, in part because of the growth of smaller businesses who have like less massive amounts of inventory, so they're shipping smaller amounts, LCL is really useful. And even though it's existed for a while, the digitization of freight, meaning it makes it much easier to track, the cargo that's within these containers at every point along the supply chain, has made LCL much easier to follow and offer to customers with much less friction. So just, technologically, it's become more feasible and therefore more popular. Also capacity. If you want a full container, you may be waiting for a while, but if you could squeeze a smaller amount of goods into a partial container, then that is also one of the reasons why we're seeing more people booking LCL. So these are numbers internally. So you can see these dips are because of things like Chinese New Year, when we would regularly see a dip, but you could look at market numbers and they pretty much matched what we've been seeing in our internal marketplace, which is fascinating and opened up a lot more space to smaller businesses who are shipping smaller amounts of goods.
And one thing that we talk about internally is, obviously, if you're a larger shipper who has 200 containers that need to be moved from China to the US, then going LCL is not going to be a solution for you, right? But it's more of this, okay, is there a certain amount of supply that I can send via LCL instead of air? Because that's also tight. And then kind of like, what should I send where and how, and dividing up your supply chain so that you make sure to get some of your goods at least.
For sure. I mean, we've seen people splitting up modes. It's like one of the things that importers and exporters have really been doing to mitigate delays and just not getting goods in time is to send some LCL, to send some with air cargo, and try to kind of play around with lanes to see which ones have the least delays, and then to get goods as quickly as possible, like kind of hedging their bets to see what's going to work the best based on data and expectations from their freight forwarders. So this is what we've been seeing as well on the Freightos.com marketplace. Just in case anyone doesn't get the acronym, this is LCL-FTW, which is for the win. So LCL for the win on Freightos.com. We've been seeing just a lot of people booking LCL shipments. And when we asked in the survey what people's preferred mode of shipping is, most of them answered LCL. It's a pretty marked number compared to, any other mode. Of course, other people are still shipping air freight. There's FCL, but slightly less. So LCL is really, by and large, the big winner in terms of the shipments that we're seeing on Freightos.com. Let's see the next slide.
Oops. There we are. Transit time. Let's talk about transit time.
Wow.
I thought we were moving toward the more optimistic side of things, but
I mean, it's not all bad news, maybe.
Yeah. But I actually, this is the point that I saw most frequently in our questions that we asked people before the webinar on how people are adapting, where people are learning. In the first year or so of the pandemic, I think people just didn't know what to do and they were constantly caught by surprise. And now I think people are learning, we can't wait for pricing to go down right now. We have to actually just because there's that pricing versus delays kind of dilemma always, where it's like, well, do I want to wait for pricing to go down? But then if I'm also expecting delays, then actually I have to be shipping even earlier than I used to be shipping if I need to get my goods by the holiday season. And I think that a lot of probably the most frequent answer that I saw to that question that we asked people on the registration page was that people are just front loading their shipments and understanding that it could be a month from the time that they book a shipment to the time that their goods even get on the ship, and taking that into account.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think 2 years ago, the recommendation was to not order so far in advance because then you need to, pay for warehousing, and then you are, have too much inventory and it's not selling out quickly enough. But now pretty much the opposite recommendation is true. Getting your goods on time means just ordering with enough lead time. That's, significantly more. We can look at shipping times, LCL, China to US specifically, and see that, transit times are just climbing and climbing. Again, it's the same reasons. It's this domino effect that we're seeing with congestion because of outbreaks, because there's, capacity is totally maxed out. And when ships get to port, they have to wait to unload because there's just not enough manpower and not enough capacity. So again, we have been seeing importers and exporters really dramatically shifting how early they order goods. It's been 18 months, so people have gotten used to just adjusting their timeframes for delivery. And then, you just kind of ballpark it the best you can, communicate with your freight forwarder, and hope that things get in on time. So in terms of holiday shipping, I think most goods are already on their way for the holiday season at this point. Back to school was, way before regular summer peak season. We started talking about this last year in summer peak season when we started seeing demand really starting to climb, and congestion building up. And it's as if peak season just didn't end. People are, ordering tons of goods online, and businesses are scrambling to keep up. So, order with a lot of time is the bottom line here.
Yeah, and let's look at kind of, I guess, on a little bit of a happier note, how people have adapted in terms of port congestion and looking at shifting ports and stuff like that. You want to talk through this chart?
Yeah, totally. So this port is interesting because while it used to be that you would ship larger quantities of goods to one port, and and then worry about getting them where they need to go across the country by, ground transport, by truck or by rail or with a 3PL, however it was being distributed. Now we're seeing kind of trying to split up shipments again, maybe having multiple LCL or air shipments going to closer to the final destination. So instead of worrying about getting things across the country from Long Beach, of let's say trying to get to a port on the East Coast that's less congested, and then you can reduce transit times and get, goods with FedEx or UPS or wherever they're being shipped from at that destination port to where they need to go. And so when we're looking at searches on different routes, basically would use Freightos, you could specify the lane that you're looking for. And we usually see a very large number on specific lanes. As the pandemic has progressed, we're seeing more and more variation in what importers and exporters are looking for in terms of lanes. And that's indicating this kind of like innovative way of, trying to get things to different locations and cut down transit times. So it is possible to mitigate at least some of the delays and the costs by thinking about where your goods need to go and looking for different kind of pricing on different lanes. So that's basically what we've been seeing in our surveys and in the data internally in Freightos, both from FBX and from our ordering data, from our booking data. We hear from freight forwarders and we hear from importers and exporters. And other logistics providers, customs brokers, we get to hear a lot from a lot of people.
And also just a reminder, if anyone wants to get in touch directly with Daphna from corporate marketing, just email her directly at Daphna, Dafna at Freightos.com, and feel free to share your story with her as well. Also, if you have any insights for us in terms of what you would like us to talk about on future webinars, feel free to get in touch with us directly on chat. We're always available on chat on the website. Thank you so much for coming today. Corinne, you want to just say goodbye to everyone as well? It was an engaging chat, and thank you for all of your questions. It always keeps us on our toes when we see that there are questions rolling in and we see that people are participating. And we hope that, as much as we said that things aren't going to stabilize so soon, we do hope that people are finding ways to mitigate and to continue to build your businesses and grow your businesses despite these challenges.
Yeah, we just we wish everyone happy shipping and an easy, low friction experience getting your goods from where they are to where they need to be. Thank you all for really being here.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.